Open Source Advocate. I'm back with another video. I want to talk today about Mesh Central. It's an RMM system. It's open source and free, of course. It's remote machine management or remote monitoring management. However you want to say it, it basically gives you access to remote machines running Windows, Linux, or Mac. Also BSD is included in that. It's a pretty nice system. It runs as a node service in a web server. So you basically install this using npm, then you run it with Node, and then you open up the web server and you get install packages for Windows and Mac, and you get a script that will run an installer on a Linux machine or BSD machine, and those show up in your list of machines. You can create groups and all kinds of great things with it. Let's get into the install. So the first part I'm going to do is going to be an install here on my local machine and running it as the server. This would run then, of course, on my local network for my own machines here in my home or in my business, depending on where I'm running this. The second part is where I'll run it on DigitalOcean, and I'll actually go through the process of installing npm and Node, and I'll use some software called NVM, called Node Version Manager, to do that. So I'll walk you through that process as well. I already have npm and Node installed on this machine, so we'll just start off with that section first. So the first thing you want to do is open up your terminal. If you're in your home directory, that's fine. If you prefer to do this in some other directory, that's okay as well. Just move into that directory. The first thing you want to do is create a new folder called Mesh Central. You can call it anything you want. I'm just going to call it Mesh Central because it makes it easy to identify in the directory structure. So I'm going to do make directory Mesh Central, and then I'm going to move into that directory. And then I'm going to use Node, or npm in this case, to actually install Mesh Central. So it's a pretty simple command. npm install Mesh Central. I got to make sure I spell this correctly. It's going to go out and use the Node package manager to pull down the files that it needs, and then it's going to install Mesh Central. It's very quick. It only takes a few seconds, as you can see, and it's already downloaded. So now we can say ls to see what's in the directory. And there you can see there's a node modules folder and a packagelock.json folder. So the next thing we need to do in order to run this is cd node modules. That's node underscore modules. We can do an ls to see what's in here. There's a lot of files that actually make this run. So I'm going to clear that out. The first time we run Mesh Central, we want to do this. Node Mesh Central. Then we're going to do --cert. This tells it to create some certificates for it to make it an SSL based web service. So we're saying --cert, and then I'm going to give it the IP address. If you're using a domain, which we'll do in the second part, you can just put in the domain name that it's getting the certificates for. But I'm going to do this as 9.25.78.16 because that's my Neo router address for this machine. So I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to start up the node process. It's going to generate those certificates, and very quickly we have our server up and running. A couple of things to take note of here is, first, it says the redirection server. So the HTTP server is running on port 1024. Normally this will run on port 80 if you don't have any other servers running on that machine using port 80. I do. I use port 80 for other servers on this machine already and on some of my other machines. So what happens is Mesh Central goes out and says, well, let me find the next port that's available, and it happened to find 1024. If we move down the screen a bit, we see a few other bits of information. So first it says hybrid LAN plus WAN mode. You can configure Mesh Central to run LAN only, but in this case it'll actually run where it can be accessed through the internet if I set up the right kind of port forwarding and things like that. Here on the AMT server information, you can see again that it's running on port 4433. I think this is a standard port for AMT, which is an Intel-based service that you can use to access Windows machines for the most part. This is available. It's something I don't use, but it is there, so be aware of that. Right here it says, and it's telling us, there is no user set up yet, so the next new account will be the site administrator. This is important. This means that whenever you set this up on the public internet, if you ever do that, you want to go to the site pretty quickly and generate yourself as the first user so that you will be the administrator of the site. Then you can go through some configuration, and I'll show you the config file, and in there's a place to set allow sign up false so that other users can't just sign up and instead you have to invite them or create an account for them and give them the credentials the first time. This last line tells you that your HTTPS server is running on port 1025. So what will happen is the HTTP server will forward you from 1024 to 1025 on the same IP address. This will force it to be an HTTPS connection, which is what you want when you're doing this type of work. So I'm going to stop out of this server briefly, and I want to show you how you get the IP address. So I'm going to type in IP-addr show. Now after this you can say like NR0. I think this will give me, no, it doesn't see it. So I'll do IP-addr show just in general. And here we can see all of the different NIC connections that I have and what their IP addresses are. And here I can see it's actually NR-TAP. So I think if I do IP-addr show NR-TAP, yeah, so NR-TAP shows me the actual IP address of the Neo router client that I'm running. And you can see here that's .16. So this is how you find out what your IP address is to set that up for your cert. I'm going to clear that, and I'm going to start the Node Mesh Central server again. Now this time, since I've already done the cert part, I don't have to do that piece again. I can just say Node Mesh Central to start up the server. It's going to use the certificates that it already generated. I'm going to type in localhost with the port number of 1024. That should be the non-secure version, which should forward me to port 1025 for the SSL secured version. And it did. Now, because it's a self-signed certificate, you can see we get the your connection is not private warning. You have to click advance, and then you have to click yes, I want to go here. It looks a little bit different on Firefox, so just be aware of that. And when you come up the first time, this is the login screen that you'll see. So I'm going to click right here to register, and it's asking for a username. I'll just use the one that I use all the time, an email. Again, I'll use the same one that I always use, and then my password. You always want to use a strong password, so make sure that we do that. I'm going to hit on create account, and I'm now the site administrator, and we've got quite a bit of stuff here that we can look at and go through. So initially you'll see that there's some setup here that we can do. So if you want to do two-factor authentication, you can absolutely do that right here. You can set up your Google Authenticator app or your OTP app. Free OTP is a really great one that I use instead of Google Authenticator. And then you've got your backup codes, and you can type in the code that this QR code gives you in order to set up your two-factor authentication. So I'm not going to do it right now, but anytime you're running a production site, I highly recommend doing this. You can also manage your security keys right here. So anytime you need to add a key, you can do that here, and you can manage your two-factor authentication this way. So here we can allow web notifications. So if I set up notifications for certain events, basically this can send me a notification through the browser here if I click on allow. Your localization settings. So you can just tell it to use the browser value. So if you already have it set in your browser, your locale, so your language and time zone, things like that, you just leave this set. But if not, you can go here and actually pick the correct locale for where you're at. So when we set up the notification a while ago, here's the notifications that we can actually pick from. So you can set up sound. You set up device connections, device disconnections. So if you're watching and you're concerned about devices disconnecting, this is one you could check, and actually it would give you a notification whenever it saw a device disconnect. If you have users who you tell turn your machines off at night, then you're going to see this happen every night. Maybe you're checking to make sure they're doing that. There's lots of reasons why you might want that notification. So the Intel AMT desktop and serial events. So if you have the Intel AMT set up and you're using that, then you can also get notifications for certain events from that as well. So here you can change the email address that you used when you signed up or set up the administrator account. You can change your password, and then of course you can delete your account. Now, I'm the administrator, so deleting the account wouldn't make a lot of sense, but you do have the capability. So when you set up Mesh Central, the first thing it does is set devices up in groups. For me, as a person just using this in my home, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that, but I could set up a group for myself, and then a group for my wife, and then a group for maybe my parents who I'm going to do remote support for, those kind of things, so that I have their machines in different groups. But if you're an administrator of a lot of machines for different companies, let's say you're a contractor, you might have a lot of companies you're doing work for. You would create groups for each of those businesses and pull their devices into those groups, or you could create multiple groups for a business and pull their devices into different groups to keep them separate. Maybe you want servers separate from client machines, Windows machines separate from Linux machines, those kind of things. So you basically create a device group and then you add devices to that group, and you can create multiple groups to add devices to. It's just a hierarchy and a way of separating those devices. Before we do that, I'm going to move down through the rest of these options. So you have My Events. So these are events that happen within the Mesh Central server, and you can see what things are happening when you add a device, when you delete a device, when you access a device, when you access the server itself. So this just tracks all of the events that you take inside of here, kind of like an audit log. Next you have My Files, so you can actually add files to your Mesh Central server. This comes in handy when you're trying to transfer files from Mesh Central to another system. So you can basically set up file server storage here. Sometimes you need certain programs, you need to transfer that over to a system that you're connecting to. So keeping those things in here is pretty handy. So users, maybe you have multiple users who are going to be accessing the Mesh Central server. You can give them different roles and permissions, and then you can basically add them in here, or you can see them in here and take certain actions on those users from here. And then finally you get this nice little dashboard. It's a pretty quick look at what's going on, so you can kind of see my server stats here, any information about any devices, groups, things like that that are added. And then you can download a server backup, so you can basically make a backup of your server, download it, and then re-upload it, so if something catastrophic happened, you would have a backup of it. So not only can you download the backup, you can also restore a backup. So once you set up the system again, you can restore the backup that you made. So you kind of set it up new and then go in here and click on restore and bring up that backup that you made before to have it all set back the way that it was. So here you can actually check the server version, and you can see, are there any updates available and do I need to run an update? And you can show the server error log. In this case, there are no errors because we haven't been running the server that long. If you go across the top here, you can see server stats when you're on this setup for your server. So different things that you can find out about your server and how it's running. Not much going on because we don't have anything really running on it yet. You can go into your server console to take some actions to see what's happening within the server. And then you can do some trace logging within the server as well. So if you're seeing issues or wondering about something, you can see some trace logging happening. So I'm going to go back up here to the top, basically to the My Devices section. And the first thing we want to do is create a new group for our devices that we're going to add. So you just give the group a name, and I'm going to say local machines. Here you can choose whether you're going to use a software agent or the Intel AMT agent. In this case, I'm going to leave it on software because I'm running Linux machines and Mac machines. I'm not really running any Windows machines at this point. But if you do have Intel AMT and you want to use that, you can. And then you can give it a short description. So I'm going to click OK. So now I've got that device group and I can start adding devices. So this Add Serial button is basically how you add a new machine through the Intel AMT setup. You can move to this next option and just add the machine through the normal setup. This will be the one that we use. And then you can also send out an invite link to someone. So if someone calls you and says, hey, I need some help with something, you can send out an invite link. They will get the software that they need, they will run it, and then their machine just pops up on the screen. So I'll show you how that works here in just a second. So I'm going to go here and do add a machine. So you get a nice little pop-up window, pretty straightforward. You choose the operating system. So I want you to notice that there's Linux, BSD, so this is Linux and Unix, and then you have Mac OS. You also have the Windows uninstaller and the Linux uninstaller. So pay attention to these, because if you ever need to uninstall the agent from one of those clients, then you'll want these. If we go to Windows first, if we just stay on Windows, you have a couple of options here as well. So you can say run this in the background and make it interactive. You say run it in the background only, and of course interactive only. I'm going to leave it on background and interactive. So down here you've got two different links basically. You've got the mesh agent and then the 64-bit mesh agent. So depending on the type of machine that you're adding this to, you'll want to pick the right version of that agent. When you click it, it's going to download an exe, and all you do is run that exe on the client machine that you want to connect, and it'll connect up. So I'm going to go and move back down to Linux. In Linux, you get a bash command or a shell script that you run. So I'm going to scroll down just a little bit here, and I'm going to copy this command. Okay, I'm going to set this up on this machine first. So I'm just going to run this command here. And you see it downloads quickly. It's running as super user, so it wants the super user password. And it installs. And immediately you can see it pops up back here. Now this is the local machine, so you'd expect, well, yeah, that's pretty quick. It's the local machine. Use the same command for every Linux machine, so it's nothing magical or special. So we're going to go do another one right now. So I'm going to bring back up my terminal here. I'm going to SSH over to one of my other machines. And this is one of my laptops, so I'm going to run the same command. And again, it prompts for the password. And it runs, it installs the agent. And you can see right here is my other machine. So this is the machine I'm on. It is an iMac, it is running Linux. And this is the machine that's remote here, a laptop. So I've got a couple more just to show that we can do it. So now I'm going to SSH into a different machine just to show you that it is actually working. So I'm going to SSH into my media server. And I'll run the same command again. And you see it pops up right away. So you say, great, you've got all these machines popping up. What good does that do me? So here's the secret of it. This is the nice part about this system. So if I want to go over to my test laptop and look at the desktop of it, so first you see a lot of information that comes up whenever you click on that particular machine. But across the top here is really where the magic happens. So you have desktop, you have terminal, you have files, events, and then the console for the system. And if I want to go see the desktop, I can just click on Connect. This is going to create a WebRTC HTML5 based connection to the desktop of that machine. So you can see here, it comes up. It actually has two monitors. That's why it looks this way. I'm going to log in using the password that I have for that machine. So here I can see my actual pCloud drive has opened up. So this is my online storage drive. I can take actions. I can control the screen from here. I can disconnect just as easily as I connected. Let's go look at a different machine. So we come back and let's go look at my media server. This is one that runs Linux Mint. So again, I'll go to the desktop. I'll click on Connect. It's going to form that HTML5 WebRTC connection to that desktop. Here we go. I've got it pulled up and you can see that the updater ran. Everything looks to be up to date. I can close that window. Now this looks pretty small. You actually have some controls up here to make this go full screen so that you get a little bit bigger view. I'll click on that so you can see it scrolls in. You can also adjust your Agent Remote Desktop settings here from the upper right of the window. And then of course when you're finished you can disconnect. You can also go to the terminal and connect to that machine. This is my pool, my zpool. And you can see the zpool status there, the ZFS pool information. So here we can just move into the media folder. We can see what media drives I have out there. It's all pretty standard to access this stuff from this terminal, but I didn't have to do SSH. I just brought it up inside of the mesh agent. I can now disconnect. We can also go to Files, so I can connect, and it brings up the file system for that machine here. So I can go in here and take actions on these files. I can download these files. I can transfer files. There's really a lot of control here for the file transfer system. It's really pretty nice. And then again, when you disconnect, that goes away. Here we can see the events, and again the console, and it tells you whether or not it's connected or not. Alright, now we're going to set up the DigitalOcean side of this. So I've shown you this before, but I'll go through it again. We're going to go to Create Droplet. This is basically what DigitalOcean calls their virtual server, a droplet. I'm just going to stick with Ubuntu. That's fine. Everything that I need right there. I'm not going to do one of their one-click apps this time. I'm just going to do a straight install of Ubuntu. I'm going to stay with the standard level of hosting. I don't need any of the advanced features or the better performance. Again, they always drop you on 40. I'm just going to hit this little left arrow. I'm going to pick 10. And then I'm going to move on down so you can enable backups. And then, of course, you can always do attached storage if you need it, which I don't. And then here we go. I'm going to pick one of these three. These are the closest to me geographically, and they're all about the same distance. So I'm just going to go with New York. That's fine. SSH keys. So remember, we can use SSH keys. That's always your best option. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to pick this one. And then we're going to move on down here. And I don't need to do any of that, but I am going to give it a name. And I know this time I'm going to do mesh.opensourceisawesome.com, I believe. Let's check. I've got it open here on Hover. Yeah, opensourceisawesome.com is my domain. So I'm just going to set up a subdomain off of that here in a minute. And down here, I don't need to do anything special, so I'm going to say create the droplet. So DigitalOcean is pretty quick. It's going to set up the VPS, and it's going to assign me some disk space and some CPU and some RAM. And it's going to generate this Ubuntu image, and you can see it moving across there. It's pretty quick. It doesn't usually take very long at all for this to finish. And when it finishes, I'm going to get the IP address. So I'm just going to copy that IP address, and I'm going to go back over here to Hover. Hover is one of my providers for URLs, and I'm going to go in here and set up the DNS. So here you get into Hover, you can click on whichever URL you want. In this case, this is the one I want, and I'm going to go right here to DNS, and I'm going to add an A record for this. So I click on add, and it's already set to A. I need to give it the host name that I want, so in this case I want mesh, and then here's the IP address that we just copied. And I'm going to ask it to go for 5 minutes. Again, I don't know if it can go this fast, but we're going to find out. So I'm going to hit do it. And there we go. Now we have an A record for mesh, and it goes to the IP address that we set. Now that's not going to do us a lot of good because I haven't actually installed anything yet. So I need to go and actually log in to this IP address. So I'm going to open up my command window here, and we're going to do SSH root at the IP address. Yes, I want to connect, and it should detect my SSH keys, and I'm logged in. So the first thing I want to do is just update the server. You always want to do that first. So sudo apt. And you don't even need sudo in this case. Your root update, and then we'll upgrade -y. So it's going to go out, get the newest packages that are available, and then it'll start the upgrade process. Oh, I must have mistyped something. No, I didn't. Apt upgrade -y. There we go. I don't know why that didn't go through with the double ampersand there, but for some reason it didn't want to do it. There we go. Server's up to date. So now I've got to go install npm and Node because I don't have that on here yet. If I do node-v, you can see there's no version of Node. Now there is a version of Node that's available from Ubuntu, but it's usually way behind. Like, I mean, so far behind, it's not funny. It's not the version that you want to install and use for most things. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use a program called NVM to go and get that. So to do this, the easiest way is to open up a browser and in Google type in install NVM DigitalOcean, and they have a site out there that tells you exactly how to do it. You go to this site, if you scroll down, you'll get to the section about using NVM right here. And it tells you what you need to do, which is basically take this command, and then we're going to put that into our command terminal. So if you're not a big Linux user all the time, just be aware that when you highlight something, you don't actually have to copy it. You can just middle click, which is the mouse wheel. You click it and it'll paste in what you highlighted last. It's a pretty nice little shortcut, very convenient. So we're going to go get this thing. Let's see if it actually got it. It did. It was so fast it didn't even show like it was getting it. Now we need to run this command. So this is a shell command. This is a bash command. These can be dangerous if you don't know what they are or what's in them. So if you ever want to see what's in it, you can just do cat and then start typing the name of the file and hit tab, and it'll cat it out. Or you can do nano if you really want to kind of see what's in it and scroll through it. Now to run this, I'm going to do sh./ which means in this folder, and I'm going to start typing the name of the file again, and I'm just going to type it in. So it says that it finished. It was really fast, again, extremely fast, but with DigitalOcean that's always the case. It's telling us that in order to make this change stick, we may need to do a couple of things here. So the first thing we might want to try is just saying, normally on your own machine, especially if you don't want to reboot, you can try saying source ~/.profile. So this is basically where it made some changes. When you do this, this is trying to tell Ubuntu like, hey, kind of refresh this file. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So if we do md nvm -- version, we see the version of NVM. Now we can look at the available versions of Node and NPM that are out there. So we can do NVM ls-remote, so ls-remote, so list remote. It's going to tell us all of the versions that are out there. And it looks like the latest version out there is 12.9.1, so let's try to install that. So we'll do nvm install 12.9.1. It's going to go out and get that version and install it. So now if we do node-v, we can see that that's the version of Node that we got, and if we do npm-v, we see the version of NPM that we wanted. So we're pretty well set. We've got Node and NPM installed on Ubuntu server. Now I'm going to make a directory called Mesh Central, and I'm going to cd into that directory, and then I'm going to do npm install Mesh Central. It's going to go out and grab those files from the Node Package Manager, just like we did on the desktop, except now we're out there on our DigitalOcean server. We can do an ls and see what we've got here. So we're going to cd into node modules to run it, and it actually needs to be underscore. We can check here to see what files are here. Now we can say node mesh central --cert, and this is mesh.opensourceisawesome.com. Let me double check my spelling. It looks good, so now I'm going to hit enter. And it should be starting up my service and telling me where these things are running. So now you can see we actually get the normal 443, which is what we expect. You still get 4433 for the Intel AMT, but for our normal website we get 443. Now this is still going to have self-signed search right now because we haven't done all of the configuration we need to do for Let's Encrypt. But we'll open up a browser here and we'll go to mesh.opensourceisawesome.com. And if our DNS routing is set up, it's going to try to take us over to the port 80, and you see it automatically jumps us to the secure port 443, but it gives us the warning because of the self-signed certificate. So I set it up, I know that it's okay. I'm going to go in here. First I'm going to create my user, and that's going to be bmcgonagh, brian@fixitdelrio. Oops, tabbed without finishing my email, and my secure password. One more time. and then we're going to create the account. So this will be the admin user account, just like we got before. This is my password manager popping up and asking, do I want to store this there? So I'll say yes I do, and it automatically goes in. I'm going to do a session on the password manager that I use up here another time, but it's another nice open source free option for password management, which is great. It saves me so much time, and I don't have to have the same password for everything. All right, we're logged into the Mesh Central system on DigitalOcean. And I just want to show you what happens here whenever we just stop the node service from running. It goes away, which is what you would expect. So now we don't have to do all of this time because we have those self-signed certs. I'm just going to start it back up. It'll come right back up. It's going to use the certs it already had. It's going to be on the ports that we already had. And then the system will come right back. Now, of course, it's going to ask you to log back in because you stopped it from running. So we'll do that. And we're logged back in as our administrative user. Now the big question before we even start adding machines is, how do you get Let's Encrypt set up? So I do want to go through that because it's not something you do through the user interface yet. I'm really hoping that someday they're going to put all of that stuff in the user interface. You just go through and check some boxes and it becomes pretty easy. I'm going to do one on an email server system that has exactly that set up, and it's really great. So we do have to stop the server again in order to do this. So I've stopped that service. Now if we go back one folder directory to the Mesh Central folder and list out the files here, you're going to see something that says Mesh Central Data. So we'll just look in there real quick. So inside of here you're going to see that there's the cert files, the key and .crt files that got generated for our self-signed certificates, the web server certificates, things like that. But there's also this little config.json file, and this is the one that we need to go in and actually make some changes in. So we're going to do nano config.json. It's going to open up and we're going to see a whole lot of things in here. So first thing that's going to happen is it sees this as my domain, and that's not correct. So I'm going to change this to the actual correct domain, mesh.opensourceisawesome.com. This is fine for the MongoDB that it uses. Now, normally you might want to change the port, set up some security around MongoDB, those kind of things. So there's a lot of security things that you can do inside of this configuration file. I'm not going to go through it right now, but just be aware that these settings are in here. The MongoDB name is fine as Mesh Central because that's what it's using. That's going to make it really easy if you ever have to go into MongoDB and do any kind of queries straight through the terminal. Just knowing that it's called Mesh Central will help you quite a bit. So you can set up passwords for your session keys. They have some default things in here. I'm just going to leave them like they are for now. We'll come back and change them later. So right here you can see port 443 is what it wants to use, and port 80, that's what's set up, so I'm going to leave that as it is. So WebRTC is kind of cool. It's set to false by default, but I believe if you set this to true, it will actually try to make a peer connection between you and the client machine whenever you're connecting to it, which can speed things up quite a bit. Right now it's set to false, so I'm going to change this to true, and then we'll save our changes. Here you can set up your password requirements, so if you want something more than 8, you could set this to 10. You could set this a little bit higher. This is a pretty high number for a password, 128. If anybody sets that, they're really doing a great job. But here you can require more than one uppercase, more than one lowercase, and so on, just going out through these settings. So now we have the setup for the actual Let's Encrypt. I'm going to go here and I'm going to replace this email address with mine. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to replace the DNS information for my domain name. Alright, I saved my changes and I exited out of that, so now I'm going to go back into, so I'm back into my Mesh Central folder. I'm going to go back into my Node modules folder, and then we're going to restart the server. Again, we want to do the cert with the name. Nope, not that one. We want to do the cert and we want to put in the domain name again. and just double check what you type in to make sure that it's correct. We're going to let the server start up. You see that it comes up in the background. Now, according to their instructions, the server will get some Let's Encrypt certificates on its own after we've made those configuration changes. And sometimes they say it takes a few minutes, so I'm going to let this sit and I'll come back in a minute and we'll check and see if we can tell that it's got any better certificates than the self-signed certificates that we got right away. What I'll do is I'll open up Firefox and we'll take a look at it from there because I have not approved this site yet through Firefox. I want to explain a little bit about the certificates that get created whenever you start your Mesh Central node server. Inside of your Linux distro that you've started this up on, you'd want to go into the Mesh Central and then / Mesh Central -data. On Windows, this would of course be the drive name or the drive letter, colon, / Mesh Central / Mesh Central -data. So if you're using Windows, it's just the different formatting for the directory structure, but it's the same location. When you first start Mesh Central, it doesn't have all of this when you first install it. Before you've run it the first time, this folder doesn't even exist. So when you first start it, this is what gets created, and you have all of these private keys. That's why you get the warning on the web page on the background. I went through and set up the configuration for Let's Encrypt, and I actually let it run overnight. I was hoping it would be a little bit faster than that. Even running overnight, it never got the Let's Encrypt certificates in the way that the documentation for Mesh Central says that it should. Now, I could completely have something not filled out correctly on the configuration, but according to their documentation, all I had to fill out was my email address on the Let's Encrypt section. I did that, plus I put in the server name, and it still never got the information that it needed. So according to their documentation, once it gets the Let's Encrypt certificates, you'll have a Let's Encrypt folder inside of this directory. I never got that. I went ahead and deleted all of the certs and key files out of this folder. I then restarted the node service and asked again for the certificates. I still never got the Let's Encrypt certificates that you need in order to have the website open up in the background without this warning. So I'm going to move forward without the Let's Encrypt certificates. I know that this is a good site. It's just that if you tried to do something, for instance, with an iOS application at some point, it would not pass through this unless you put in some special parameters inside of that application. This is a normal warning that you get, but as a user, if you ever come across this warning and you're not absolutely certain that you're at the right site, you should leave that site immediately. You should really heed these warnings. As the administrator setting this up, I know that this warning is happening because I caused it to happen, so I can move forward. I'm going to go back in. I'm still on DigitalOcean. I'm going to start up my server again, so I'm going to go back into the head folder here, and then we're going to go into Node Modules, and we'll start the Mesh Central service. I don't have to make the certificate request in the command this time because I've already done that and I have the certificates in this folder. So I'm just going to start the server. You'll see it starts up normally. It points to port 80, and that's going to forward me to 443 just like we've seen in the past. This right here indicates the mode that you're running in, and you can change this inside of the config. But right now it's running in LAN plus WAN mode, so local area network and wide area network mode. So this will work over the internet or over the local network. You can change this to run in LAN only mode so that it's not trying to run over the internet. For me, I want this to run over the internet. I'm on DigitalOcean, that's the whole point. So I'm going to go back to my server. I'm just going to refresh the page here. Still get the warning. I expect this completely. I'm going to go ahead and tell it proceed ahead. I'm going to log in with my credentials that I created. And I did set up the two-factor authentication. So on my phone, I'm going to open up my two-factor authentication app, and I'm going to get the code that I need. Once I've entered that two-factor authentication code, you can see that I get logged in just fine. I don't have any devices yet. I haven't created a device group, so I need to do that just like we did before. So let's just create a device group, and I'm going to call this My Machines, something really simple. I'm going to leave it on the software agent, and I'm going to just give it a simple description, the same as the name. Click OK. Now I want to add a device. I'm going to click on Add Agent. I'll go and select Linux. Again, copy this command. And I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to open up a new terminal window here on my local machine. I'll paste in that command. You have to put in your super user password for this to work. Now it's a little slower this time because it's downloading from the internet, not from my local machine, but you see it popped up right away. So I'm going to go ahead and SSH into another machine. So now we're hitting one of my laptops that I use for testing different things. I'm going to paste in the same command, and again you put in your super user password. It'll go out, and then here in the background we can wait, and there you see it popped up. So that's enough for now. So I'm going to go ahead and try to connect to this machine. You can see the specifications of it. It's running Linux. I'm going to go here to the desktop area. I'm going to click on Connect, and there's the desktop. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger, and then we'll hit the space bar. That exposes our login. And then here's my desktop. This is just really a great piece of software. I love that it's being actively developed. I'm excited to see it come along, and I'm excited to see what else they add to it. One thing I would really love to see is the ability to send out an invite to someone through email and have it be a little bit more like BombGuard or GoToAssist, where it asks them to let you into their system temporarily, and when they're done, it removes the machine from here and it removes the software from their system automatically. I would love to see an open source project that does that. I just haven't found anything yet. If you have something, or you know of something that does that today and does it really well, leave me a comment. Let me know about it. I'd love to take a look at it, do a review on it, do a tutorial on it. If you're interested in Mesh Central, I highly recommend that you get out there and give it a shot. If you want to use DigitalOcean, I will put a link down in the description. If you click on it, you can get $50 of credit for use of DigitalOcean servers for the first 30 days. So that $10 server that I set up, you could set up 5 of those for 30 days and not spend a dime. And they don't start charging you just because you have an account. It's only if you have servers that are continuously running on that account. So this server that I set up, I'm going to go and destroy it here in just a minute. It's great for testing, but I like to run this locally on my own network. It works fine for that, and it's a really cool piece of software. It's just not something I need today out on the internet. Thanks for listening, and if you like this, please click the like button and subscribe so that you can hear more tutorials that I'll be bringing out in the future.